There's a spirit that defines every Tasmanian. Fight, gravel rash grit, devil-like determination. It's time to unleash this spirit on the great game. For without our boots on hallowed grounds, the AFL will never be complete, nor will we.
Hello and welcome to The Believers, Tasmania's AFL journey. As we strive for an historic 19th AFL and AFLW licence, we celebrate the many greats who have contributed so much already to the native game. My guest today, well, he grew up in the same town as me, at least spent the early part of his childhood in Penguin on the northwest coast of Tasmania. He's now the CEO of the Richmond Football Club. He had a distinguished career himself, 244 games for the Tigers, and he also played for Tasmania in that famous win over Victoria at North Hobart in 1990. I speak of Brendon Gale. Benny, so good to have you with me.
G'day, Al. Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for your time. Let's start with Tassie because you've been a very busy man over recent times and probably don't get back to Tassie as much as you'd like to, but over summer you did. What did you get up to?
I did. Look, like a lot of young Tasmanians, I guess I was restless and in a hurry and was pretty keen to get out to the big bad world, and for me that was football in Melbourne, and but as I've got older, I can't wait to get back. I don't get back anywhere near enough. Just the physical beauty is so restorative. The time you get back, and some of those old relationships with family, and you reconnect. And clearly, my mother still lives there. So yeah, I had nearly 4 weeks over the Christmas New Year period, and my wife's also from Tasmania, so the kids do enjoy getting back. And lucky enough to go to the first day of the cricket, which was arguably perhaps almost the greatest sporting event in Tasmania history, an Ashes Test.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was a great day.
Yeah, they fought for it for a long time. I find when I go back to Tassie, particularly if I go back to the northwest coast, so many nostalgic experiences, things you see, memories you have. Did you find that when you went back?
A little bit. It's funny, and I revisit it through the eyes of my son. I've got daughters that, a little older. My son's in year 9. So, I've got vivid memories of what it was like to be in year 8, year 9. So, we take a bat and ball. We're finding, you can walk up to any cricket ground and just jump in the nets and have a hit. There's golf courses you can walk on and have a belt. And it's just so, it's rich in its freedom and its access. There's a real richness to it. And it's like over here to go and have a hit in the nets or have a game of golf. We've got to plan 3 days out. You know what I mean? It's such an imposition in your time, but there it's just so free and relaxed. And I just think the access to nature, like, I can drive on the coast. You can drive 10 minutes anywhere, and you can be in a river or beach, or you can be in a golf course, or you can be in a beautiful temperate rainforest hiking. You can be anywhere, and I find that really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. Your experiences growing up in northwest Tasmania, were you born in Penguin, or is that where you first lived and then you moved to Elliot? Is that right?
No, I was born in Elliot. So Elliot's a small, a farming community inland from Burnie. It was settled by a handful of families, actually. The Gales were one. So the Gale name has been a well-known name. Yolla area, the Yolla Elliot region, very fertile farming, crops, dairy, and there was a famous little sporting club established called the Yeoman Sports Club, and a very proud sport club for football, cricket for many years. And so my father sold the farm. I think he was the 5th generation, and probably didn't want his sons to have the same future in farming and dairy farm, which is hard work. And so he moved into rural supplies, rural real estate, and we moved to town, which then was Penguin.
So the big smoke.
The big smoke of Penguin. We went from living on the farm and to living in Penguin, which is right on the coast. And we're right on the coast. We're right on the water, which was beautiful. And then, a few years later, my parents separated, and I moved to Burnie with my mother. Sort of the family sort of relocated to Burnie, but throughout that period, I was attending Marist College. So I'm a child of the coast, Alistair. That's how I like to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's interesting. My grandfather, when my dad's parents, when he immigrated with them from Cornwall, my grandfather ran the Elliot Research Farm. So that was what he came out to Australia for, and they had many years
And it's
there,
still
so
there.
that's why we're there. We ended up on the northwest coast ourselves. But what about your family's footballing history? So it goes right back to Jack, your grandfather, who played 3 games for Richmond in 1924, and he was heavily involved in Yeoman.
He was. He was a wonderful cricketer. Back then, I mean, they had to clear this impenetrable sort of region back in the 1850s. So they were hard people, and they worked hard, and sport was an outlet, I guess. So he was a horse breaker, a bit of boxing, a lot of cricket. But yeah, look, he's a little guy, I think, on the smaller side. Judging from some old photos we discovered in the Richmond Museum, he had pretty good pipes. He was stocky, so he chopped a lot of wood. But he come over with his mate Graham Chum Saltmarsh, which is another famous coastal name.
Yeah,
and I only found out a few years ago from Rhett Bartlett, who's a wonderful historian of the club, that he lived in a boarding house in Rowena Parade, where there's a cafe I go to most days for a coffee. So. But 1 year and went back, I think, for the farm. Football wasn't the calling it is now. And he umpired and was involved in sport, football, cricket for years to come. Yeah.
So when you're in farming, it occupies so much of your time. You find that farmers have very little time for any extracurricular activity. But for you, do you have memories of football always being central to family life?
Look, I think so. I left the farm when I was 7, so probably too young to look. I think my first year of school was in prep at the Yolla area school. But it was Penguin when I moved, sort of began to immerse myself in more football, mini league, and later on through school. I guess it was that stage I began to learn a bit more about my father. My father had a strong connection to football on the coast, but he was never like a lot of fathers back then. He was never sort of in your life. He was working hard and providing for the family, and so I had a brother. Michael, elder, so we just spent hours kicking the footy, playing sport, all the local hoodlums running around and surf life saving and surfing and cricket. And when we moved off the farm, sport and football became a bigger part of our life.
Yeah. Did you see your dad play footy?
No, never. No, he began in the NWFU, which was obviously the three strong leagues, that one being the Northwest. He started his career at Yeoman, then went to Wynyard, and it was at Wynyard he became All-Australian. So I remember being a young boy, and they had a sort of an old players charity day or something, and I remember seeing him play, run around, no, never. He was in media, so he sort of do around the ground special comments, and he was involved in sort of sitting on boards and committees in football administration, and also the NWTCA for many years. So never saw him play.
Yeah, I vividly remember you'd go up to the junior basketball stadium there in Penguin, and your dad would be there spending, every time I was there, I'd always see your dad there. But
typically building out crosswords. That's what he'd do. Yeah.
But he was a very, very good footballer, wasn't he? He himself had opportunity to come and play in the VFL. You mentioned his All-Australian selection. That was after his performance at the 58 Carnival when Tassie beat South Australia and Western Australia. Also played in the famous 1960 win, Tasmania over Victoria as well. And no one from the NWFU had ever been named an All-Australian at the Carnival before your dad achieved that. But clearance issues prevented him from taking up a position within the VFL. Yeah,
look, I've learned from others. Dad didn't talk about football much, and certainly never sort of pressured us into that life. But look, he must have been some sort of footballer. He was very athletic, very strong, and very fast, very powerful. Back in those days, you'd run in straight lines, I guess. He probably played a bit more like my brother, some people have said. So, yeah, to make All-Australian, multiple Tasmanian teams, and they were good teams, Alistair. I mean, he's got this wonderful old scrapbook, which his mother kept, was a huge, almost biblical proportions, this thing, and I sort of open it up every now and then, so there's incredible old photos of great teams, and they'd regularly knock off WA and South Australia and Victoria once. So he found his way to South Melbourne, who's recruited. But yeah, there was a clearance wrangle involving Ron Clegg. I can't remember, from South Melbourne. It was a bit of tit for tat. I think you had to have 3 completed full seasons in the in the Tasmanian League before you were cleared, and he completed 2. There were always exemptions that could apply. It wasn't granted, and he played here. He lived with Fred Goldsmith for a year.
Yep.
Lived in South Melbourne.
He played amateurs here, didn't he?
He played under an alias in the old Federal League for a few months, and he lived in the old. It was called the Bleak House Hotel. Now it's called the Beach Hotel.
Okay.
At the end of on the water down here, Beaconsfield Parade, there was a famous South Melbourne family that had links with a bit of organised crime, I think, judging from some of the wheelings and dealings. But it was a colourful time. But ultimately, the farm beckoned. He had to get back. They had the family farm, and like I said earlier, it perhaps wasn't as the biggest deal back then.
Didn't have the lure,
We didn't see it. I mean, Bob Rose retired at 25 to go to Wangaratta. You know what I mean? So he had a farm. That was his vocation. That was his calling, and so he went back.
Yeah, it seems strange by modern standards, but of the standard of the day, that was perfectly normal to do that type of thing. Did you go and watch Penguin play much as a youngster?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, it was my first love in football, and probably remains my first love. So there's a Penguin mini league team we'd play against. There was like a Penguin Olston primary school mini league program, and so we'd train after schools, but before the seniors would turn up. And so in 76, 77, Warren McCarthy was the new coach, and 76 beaten by Ulverston in the grand final by Ricky Graham. I think they won the state premiership that year. So 77, Billy Fielding and Chris Fielding and Gary Cowmeadow and all these, they were gods. I mean, your heroes back then were your local heroes.
Yeah.
We never got footy beamed in or streamed in or whatever, 24/7. You'd get a quarter of the week on the winners. But your football heroes were your local heroes, and they were my heroes, and still are, to be honest. When I look back, it was at a Tassie Hall of Fame gathering a few years ago, and Bill Fielding, I mean, what a god he was, what a legend. Yeah. The way he lived his life and his work ethic and his selflessness and humility. And
another dairy farmer too, isn't he?
Yeah, he'd milk 150, 200 head of cow before a game, He's just, but that was all part of the legend that was Bill Fielding. But mascot, 77 grand final.
Ah, yes.
Our mini league team, we lined up as a guard of honour, and they had a famous drought-breaking victory. And in 80, they won, and whenever they did, old Mr. Williams, he'd get the fire truck out and go up and down the main street with the players drinking beers in the back. And we'd always go to mass on the Sundays, Alistair. We'd be forced by parents, so very observant. But Sunday mornings when Penguin won a premiership were always a windfall, because my brother and I would get there early and we'd go to the old rec ground and just go around and pick up all the old bottles, Coke bottles and lemonade bottles, and take them down for refunds for 10 cents a pop or whatever. So great days, great memories.
And Michael played in Penguin's last premiership in 1985, and every year I get myself worked up because I think when Penguin makes the grand final, they're going to win. We've lost 3 by under a kick, I reckon, in recent seasons. But I remember looking at that photo in 85 against Smith in the last premiership. Michael's part of that. Yeah,
and that was a famous win because they were beaten in the semi-final by Smithton by, I would say, close to 80 points, like belted. They got to the prelim and beat Wynyard at Devonport by, I think, a point, and then met Smithton again at the grand final. And, there was, I remember there was, champagne on ice and the old Saints. And they won by 80. It was like a 150-point turnaround.
Wow.
And it was pretty willing. I mean, I remember Garth Barrett had one of those Corpus Shop boys on the wing in a headlock, and just Chris Reynolds played well. It was a comprehensive win, and unfortunately, their last one.
Sporting, I just have this memory of the Penguin Football Club being such a central part of the community, and I think right across the northwest coast, all those sporting clubs, cricket, football, all those things it almost defined who you were. If you were good at sport, that really meant something. It was such an important part of the fabric of communities there, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, because there were lots of little dotted communities, weren't they? So, there was that participation, identification, but also the rivalries.
What did you think of
we played at Hawthorn at Devonport a couple of weeks ago as part of this Hillcrest tribute, and Peggy O'Neill went over and struggled to find accommodation, so she got a B&B, a little cottage near the Ulverston Oval. So I picked her up to take her to the game, and I still have shivers down my spine going past Ulverston. I hate them. I had in the 76 grand final, I had a little blow-up penguin. Mum must have got me or something, but I remember after the game, these local Ulverston hoods grabbed it and just choked the thing. just right in front of my eyes. I remember just crying, and I would have been 6 or 7 or something. I can't remember how
I would have loved you to have found those blokes about 12 years on, Benny, when you'd put on a bit of size, and they might not have been prepared to do that.
But a wonderful sporting tradition, a proud, those communities they're remarkable in what they contribute. So
you played at Burnie, but not at Penguin, is that right? How did that come about?
No, so I finished HSC and went to uni for a year, first year. Michael he'd been recruited into the old Form 4 system, and he was playing for Fitzroy and had just started to establish himself. I came back end of first year uni, and it was summer. I was in Burnie, just trying to get my head around into going back, and Burnie had just entered the statewide competition. And Warren McCarthy, who was the coach of those great Penguin teams, was the coach, and Colin Robinson, who was a wonderful Hawthorn player, had just returned. He was the captain, and so look, I was a young raw kid with a bit of promise, I guess, and they met and just encouraged me to think about maybe having a year and giving it a bit of a go. And I probably hadn't taken footy too seriously at that stage. I was still growing. I had a very violent spurt of growth. We had played an old scholars amateur premiership at Hobart in my uni year, but it wasn't serious footy. But so I gave it a go. I got drafted that year at Richmond, but that was the reason. It was Burnie's first inaugural year in the emerging statewide competition.
So 87 was that?
It was 87, yeah, and we made finals. Made finals our first year, and it was great.
Now, Michael Roach tells a story that he was sent by Richmond to watch Burnie play, specifically to look at Errol Bourne, and he came back and all he could talk about was you, and you'd kicked 6 in the game, and he said this lad's ready to play VFL football. Do you have any memory of that?
I remember seeing Michael Roach in the rooms after the game. Everyone knew who Michael Roach was, and he must have had a relationship with maybe Warren McCarthy or something, but I remember seeing him in the rooms and not knowing for 1 minute why he was there. But yeah, evidently he was to watch Errol, but also Craig Cross, who was from Queenstown, actually, from the west coast of Tasmania, played with me at Burnie, but a few years earlier he'd played in the Richmond under-19 premiership, and he was a prodigious talent, a freakish talent, probably lacked commitment in a few other areas, but evidently they were just keeping tabs on him as well, and he'd lit the joint up with some of his ability that year. So later in the year, we played a final. It was our first final. We played Hobart at KG5, and I think Roachy and Tony Jewell were there as well. So that was probably the follow-up, and actually we lost that game, but I played a reasonable game. It was very wet. But yeah, it wasn't until after I learned that from Roachy. He was there he took that intelligence back, and here we are, all these years later.
You said you hadn't taken your football too seriously until you got to Burnie. When does that start to change? Is it when you get to Richmond, do you feel ready? Do you feel like a footballer?
Yeah, look, I left. I think I played first 18 at Marist College in year 9, and I was a rover. I was a rover. I hadn't even reached puberty. Year 12 year 11 boys, young men, and I grew to the current height inside 18 months. So I went from being, a pretty good player and competent to just being, the old man used to say, like a newborn colt, just arms and legs. And so I went to uni, and so my footy sort of stagnated a bit for a while. I found it hard to sort of come to terms with everything. I went to uni, enjoyed uni life to the full. Footy wasn't a priority, it's probably fair to say.
What were you studying?
So I studied arts law.
Yep.
Yeah. Came back to Burnie, promising, but probably did enough to get drafted of potential. Come to Richmond, just continued to develop, all started to come together, but had a couple of really bad years of injury. I had 2 groin operations, which we now refer to as osteitis pubis. My young, immature body just couldn't withstand the rigours of training, and it sort of broke down. And I got that sorted, and but I guess my brother blazed the trail. He'd established himself, and I thought, well, I could actually do that, and we spent that much time together. And you come to Richmond to the AFL, into an elite environment, and it just picks you up, the whole program. And yeah.
Did you spend much time with Michael when you first came across? Did he help you sort of settle in?
Yeah, we lived together. I spent a few months in a Tiger House, was called, a short-term hostel with young recruits, and then I lived with Michael in East Brighton, with Michael, Al Lynch, Darren Kapler, Matthew Armstrong. There's about 6 of us. We had a big old house in East Brighton, and then we lived together for a few years, and then moved out.
Gee, that would have been a good household. Imagine a fair bit of fun. As much as you were focusing on your footy, it would have been a good environment.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, we had a lot of fun just to see how they approached things. But I was struggling with injury. And they were obviously playing. Fitzroy were always very competitive. We were still struggling a bit, I guess. Lynchy was just about to take off, and Matty Armstrong and Michael was there's a lot of Tasmanian stories, a lot of friends that always come and stay over, but not professional by today's standards. But
were you just playing footy, or were you working?
No,
you were studying again. Yeah.
No, in fact, when I came over, I worked at a big accounting firm, Ernst & Young, for a couple of years, just as like an office boy, gopher, just to settle in and find my way around Melbourne and try and establish myself at the club, and then went back to uni.
And law was the aim always for you?
Yeah, sort of. Like I finished my master's degree first. I always wanted to work DFAT. I was fascinated with foreign affairs and international relations, and so I felt career and DFAT, government, something like that was the pathway, and so studying law as well doesn't hurt. That it sort of helps.
Yep.
But I kept playing footy. So the longer I played footy, the less likely that would eventuate. And so when my last 4 or 5 years of football was full time, so you really couldn't work. So when I finished football in 2001, I just went and completed my articles, which is your first year, and it's your professional qualification, and worked in a law firm for a few years.
And your footy career, you played 244 games in the end. In 1990, you're part of the Tassie team that wins, and that's very early in your career, and you got to play with a number of fantastic Tasmanian footballers, and some who are still making a name and some who never even played at VFL, AFL level. What are your memories of that experience, the 1990 State of Origin win?
Oh, look, when I look back now, it's one of those things you're really proud of. It all happened very quickly. It was my first year. I'd only played about 5 games, but we'd played a game against the Brisbane Bears at Carrara, and it was a really hot day and on a big ground. And we had a good win, a tough grinding win. Actually played okay, and so I was sort of picked off that performance really. And Shorey said, I never played Till Cup with Tassie, but so it was my first game for the state to play clearly with my brother, and some of those other Fitzroy boys who I live with, who I talked about. And so there's some emerging names, but, like guys, Dougie Barwick and Scotty Clayton and, it was wonderful. And at half time, I think some members of that 1960 Victorian team, who were the only team at that stage who had beaten Victoria, were sort of paraded. There was a bit of an event for them, and I remember Dad and Stuart Spencer and a few. So it was pretty proud. It was pretty cool, And Shorey, an eccentric coach, but sort of would try and sort of find anything to give you that little bit of extra motivation. He made us walk around the entire circumference of the North Hobart Oval. So we basically come in we're staying at the old hotel up on the hill. Yep. But rather than just taking the beeline through the main gate, we walked down the Lydiard Street end and around the other side, the Ride Streets, down through the crowd, through the wet area, and just to get the boys. It was like, I felt very awkward and self-conscious, but sure, he was loving it. But it was great.
It's like, taking the bus down Caxton Street, that kind of thing. Like to feel that passion.
I remember before the game, and I've always been pretty composed in the way I prepare, but I remember James Manson having Colin Alexander almost in a headlock. Collingwood teammates at the time ramming him into lockers and shaking the whatever out of him. And I thought, wow, we're on here. We're on.
Well, when the Vic's like that day, I've heard stories of, Monkey really mouthing off. Doug Barwick talks about how vocal he was that day.
Big Monkey and Jimmy and Monkey going at us. They were, look, at the end of the day, it was, I guess the thing we like to admit is it wasn't their A team. Their A team played the day before in a huge game with that Lockett. And
we might just edit that bit out, I reckon, Benny.
Yeah, no, it was a good, the depth of Victoria was incredible. Some great play, Gary Ayres and, line to line, they were great players, but a famous victory.
You went on to captain Richmond, and obviously your leadership qualities had been identified for you to be given that position. What did that mean to you, knowing that you're going back to your grandfather, had a connection to the club as well, and to have that standing within the group?
Well, I wasn't the permanent captain. I was a vice captain. Matthew Knights and I were joint vice captains. But Tony Free, who is a wonderful captain, tough and fearless, and he got cut down. And so we had to captain a lot for 2 years. So I think we hold the record for the joint most number of acting captain games. No, it was still to be recognised even as a vice captain. It was wonderful. I wasn't the best player, but I used to think I'd try and lead the right way and get the boys together. So it was wonderful. They were tough times, but we had a couple of finals campaigns.
You got to a couple of prelims during your career.
Yeah. We got 95. We got to Geelong and were well beaten in the end. Who were well beaten by Carlton. And 2001, my last game, in fact.
What are your memories of that occasion? Did you know it was your last game at the time, or you're hoping it's going to go further?
No, I didn't. No, it was Paul Broderick. He'd sort of announced his retirement, maybe 2 months earlier. And, we'd actually agreed to terms to go for another year. But at the end of that year, the club had to fight extra hard to keep Darren Gasper, who was uncontracted and could have dropped straight to Fremantle in the pre-season draft, and they rightly fought hard because he's a wonderful player. So it meant that sort of, made it. They said, look, we want you to play, but for half as much. And I just thought at that point in my career with the law waiting and getting pretty sore, the time was right to go, and it was the right time because the club then was able to go and get Greg Stafford, who gave him, a good 5 or 6 years of wonderful service.
During your time at the club, Richmond had its struggles, didn't it, financially? There was the Save Our Skins that players were involved in. What are your memories of the difficulties and the uncertainty surrounding Richmond at that time?
It left an impression on me. There's no doubt about that, because you're coming into, the AFL when you think you're walking into an elite club, and coming from Tasmania, clearly that's the perception I had. But when you're dispatched out around the countryside, when you're shaking hands on the corner of Brunton Avenue and Swan Street players and coaches to save your very existence, this club who 10, 12 years earlier was playing in grand finals and winning premierships, it's pretty sobering. And I don't think the club was ever going to go out of existence. I think the club used that opportunity to mobilise and get the support they needed, and Neville Crowe was wonderful. But I think what I saw from that was the impact. And when money increasingly mattered in football clubs and resources, and when our club was sort of hand-to-mouth for so long, I saw the impact that had on administrations and coaches and players, and so it left quite an impression on me, and I probably think it's sort of influenced the way I like to try and lead and manage and the things that I prioritise.
How would you describe yourself as a manager and a leader?
Well, I just felt, having some history of the club, I just felt that we've had some incredible servants of the club, through that 80s, 90s era where the club wasn't as successful as we would have liked. We had some great, board members, presidents, coaches, players, but we weren't. It didn't feel like we're always on the same page. So having that real strong sense of unity and that shared understanding of where you are and where you're trying to get to, and that shared understanding of the means by which you have to get there and the roadmap. I just felt we've got to get that really strong. So that's, that sense of alignment, I felt was lacking, and also money, and money matters when you don't have any, and I guess that's the background that my experience as a young guy with a club. So I think having a really strong, robust business model where you can fund your footy teams now, and create really strong clubs that punters can connect with and believe in is really, really important.
You got your sort of a very broad look at the way the game was being run, I suppose, when you were working at the AFLPA, and you started as the players delegate, didn't you, late in your career? Was that with the view of moving into that?
No, not at all, Al. I was the last man standing, and they used to have delegates meetings monthly at a restaurant in Carlton. You get a free feed.
Done.
So that's I got coerced into doing it. But it was interesting because later on, as the game grew and evolved and become more commercial in nature, broadcasting revenues were flowing into the game, more was being asked of players. It was important they were well represented and rewarded for their efforts and their value recognised. So there became more at stake, and the stakes grow every year. So no, but it's funny, when I went back years later after the law as an executive, it was a really rich learning experience. It's something that I probably didn't anticipate it, but I was going around the country twice a year, having formal team meetings, club meetings, player groups meetings. I was dealing with clubs around disputes, solving issues. I was seeing our clubs respond to issues in different ways at different times of the year. Some clubs just seem to sail through. Some clubs tend to be a little more reactive. Why is that? What are the distinguishing features between clubs? It was a really rich learning experience, because really all I'd known in terms of a football experience was Richmond.
Yeah, and those experiences you could take into the role of CEO, I'd imagine, as well, and gave you a great understanding of all different facets and all the needs of different clubs. So. And also the challenges, the environment the AFL works in as well.
Yep. I mean, the AFL's being a very centrist organisation. Clubs can be very focused, very insular, very driven, very competitive. Very much acting out of self-interest, because that's our responsibility as club administrators. You would need to advance the interests of your club as aggressively.
How hard is it to be objective then? I mean, when you have to be so devoted to the cause of the club, don't you? Do clubs lose perspective sometimes?
Oh, occasionally sometimes. But I think, that's our job. One as directors, administrators, we've got a legal responsibility to push our barrow as hard as we can. We need to act in the best interests of our club. And those interests are best served by strong competitive footy teams and, strong businesses. And so you need to push your club as hard as you can. But, yeah, you need to step back from time to time in the cold light of day, and you've got obligations to the code and your clubs and your counterpart clubs. But I guess that's why you have the AFL, don't you? Because, we had a situation 30 years ago when you had 12 clubs trying to sit around a table and make a good decision without acting as self-interest, and it couldn't be done. And we had a state-based competition that was bankrupt. But so, I think our job is to push our agenda and seek whatever advantage we can as a club and put ourselves in the best possible position. And it's the AFL's decision to make the right decision for the code at the right time. You know what I mean? That's it.
Yeah.
That's how it sort of works. And we've got great respect for the AFL and their authority, and we'd like to think they've got great respect for our drive and our will.
Yeah. You had 5 years as the CEO of the AFL Players Association, and then you get the job as CEO at Richmond in 2009, and very quickly after that follows your 10-year plan, which at the time you were really people mocked it, didn't they, in a way? It was such a bold vision that you had for Richmond to win 3 premierships, to go to 75,000 members as well. You've touched a little bit, I think, already on why you wanted to do that alignment piece, I suppose, to have everyone marching in the same direction. How did you feel about it at the time and the reaction to it? Because you're only a very young CEO.
Yeah, look, it was evidence-based, and also there's a feel that, once again, based on my experience and involvement with the club, Richmond was a very ambitious club. There was something in the water when you think of the origins of Richmond and Struggle Town. It was a hard working class. Think of Dyer and the team through the oppressions. They were people wanted to express their ambition and hope for a better life through their football club. So always been a very ambitious club, and there's been periods of time where it's been incredibly successful, but periods of decline and stagnation. So I always felt the club was very ambitious. So I think we needed to have a very ambitious, compelling vision of the future. I guess what I'm trying to say, we've had socks to pull up, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We've done it before. But also around some of the metrics around membership and, once again, they were evidence-based. We had a large latent support base. Some would just become disconnected. They were out there. And so we felt if we could sort of present a compelling vision, but with real plans and real accountability and real insights, rather than just hype or hope, we'd give it a shot. And the interim measures were quite modest, really, because it was simply 3 final series, 75,000 members and 0 debt by 2014, the first 5 years. And we felt if we could get somewhere near there, that gives us a platform to go and really compete in the main game. And we nearly got there. We got to 2 finals. Mm-hmm. We got about 67,000 members and we had cash in the bank. Then we felt if we're within that realm, then we've got a chance to go and actually win premierships. And that was the 3 by 10 years. That was a longer term. But yeah, we were laughed at, but we internally, we felt we had to come up with something that made us a little uncomfortable at night, that put us on the hook. But based on evidence.
And it did get uncomfortable, man. 2016, You haven't won any of those premierships at that point. Your membership's pretty solid, but you've also got a board spill to contend with. Coaching position is, in question. You take the bold move to reappoint Damien Hardwick. You stay the course on every front, but there were challenges to that, weren't there?
There were, and that's where the work we put in collectively around that alignment become really, really important, because internally 16 was a tough year. It's a tough year, but the board, and particularly Peggy, says, okay, just let's everyone settle down and let's not be making decisions based on hype, or let's not, or sound bites, or let's not be reactive. What's the evidence? What's the evidence? And I guess when we sat down and talked about what success looked like and the shared roadmap, by what we were sort of seeing, we're doing an okay job. We played in 3 final series in a row. We weren't getting far, but there were 10 teams worse than us. we'd really built our business. We'd built our balance sheet. We're a strong, profitable club. We had really strong engagement with our members and fans. There was trust. Yes, there was anger and outrage, and there was in some quarters, and clearly the old playbook. The media amplify that because they'll say, well, we'll ask the questions of Richmond, and they'll fail and they'll implode, and it'll be the same old playbook, So it was that work we'd put around those first principles, that real strong sense of alignment that sort of got us through, because internally we felt strongly the view we're making progress. 16 was a tough year, but, we took the opportunity to go back and honestly reflect and learn and renew. And I think that the process of coming out the other side of that, in terms of the trust and the strength, was catalytic. It wasn't so much the things we did, the tactical things. Yeah, we played differently, and we some personnel changes, some areas of emphasis here, but it was that hardening and strengthening was catalytic.
Knowing your personality, I think I know the answer to this question, but was there, when the threat to you and Peggy, when it was game on in terms of the board, did you ever contemplate that this might not be for you anymore? I think I know the answer, in that you would dig in and not be prepared to budge in the face of the challenge, but...
No, I didn't. It's funny how, I'll be serious, I found myself for the first time ever, like going home at night after work and after meetings and having a beer and then another one and just so that helped me a little way, just joking. But no, I felt a sense of fearlessness, to be honest. I felt like this is our way and we're just going to do it our way. And and I think when you're not scared, you feel powerful, you know what I mean? That sounds silly. So there's a sense of, I felt for Peggy because, I don't suspect, I know, because a lot of the criticism directed towards Peggy was misogynistic in nature.
Yeah, you're having a woman with an American accent at the helm of an AFL club.
What could she possibly know? And there's some sort of high-profile people in the media who were offering up those sentiments, and I just thought that was, we're trying to make the game inclusive and we should be celebrating the first female president in the history of our game. I didn't like that, but she's pretty strong, Peggy.
Yeah, I want to ask you about your relationship with Peggy, because you two have formed this, it's a beautiful relationship clearly, but it's also such a productive working relationship. Why does it work so well?
Oh, well, I think she's got she's an outstanding public company director. I mean, she knows what being, a director and governing a board requires. There's a clear demarcation between governance and management. And she involves the board, the whole board, and they're all held accountable for their respective, responsibilities and portfolios. Everyone contributes. But I think Peggy's strongest attribute in the context of footy is she's got a really strong sense of who she is, and she's been a woman in a man's world in the law for many years, and now she's a woman in a man's world in football, which is less so a man's world, pleasingly, but so she's got a strong sense of who she is. So she doesn't need to be out there making, sometimes we see, populist type reactive decisions aren't necessarily the best ones. She's not about sound bites. It's about clear, cold-headed sort of leadership, about evidence-based decisions, and incredible sense of selflessness. Like, she's here to serve the board and ultimately serve the club, and I think that filters through. If I look at the coach, I think our coach is a wonderful coach. Tactically, he's a wonderful coach, match day, but he's incredibly selfless. And he gets a bit angry at times, but he's incredibly selfless, and I think that enables the game plan to be carried out, which is such a selfless role-playing game. So it's funny, you look often the same, the corporate culture, the tone's set from the top.
Yep.
You look at Peggy and you look at Damien and you look at
the way the team plays.
Yeah, indeed. I can see the connection.
She's decided she's going to pass on the baton. How on earth are you going to replace her, Brendon?
Well, I think I've heard Peggy say the true test of successful leadership and governance is that it won't be missed. And she'll be missed, obviously, because she's a very important symbol for what we stand for, and there's a place for everyone at Richmond Football Club. But she won't be missed she's developed an incredibly capable board that's got its own cadence. So, and she sort of enabled that environment. So there'll be a process, throughout this year where someone will replace her. It'll probably come from the existing board, and they know they know the tempo because it's been demonstrated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so it's similar to the football team in that someone goes out, the next person steps in, fits into the system.
Play your role.
Yeah. What do you want to do? Long term.
Oh, look, I get asked this question a bit actually, and sometimes I feel as though I should grow up because it's still footy. But no, I'll be honest, Al, I really, when we won in 2020, it was a really, really tough year. It was a tough year, and it took a lot out of our community and our code, and it took a lot out of our footy club. It was a huge effort to get over the line, and for one moment I thought, I've got a mate I speak with, I did think maybe this is the time to tip the bails and to go out and top, and just go. But COVID hadn't finished, and the impact of COVID was still being realised, and so. But then I just thought, I really like it. I love what I do. I love. I guess the cultural and almost the institutional strength of a football club. Footy is the most important thing we do. Don't get me wrong. We've got a very, very focused approach to football, but we're much bigger than football. And I think at a time when there's so much pulling us apart as a community, locally, nationally, globally, sport, and particularly football in this country, brings people together. And that's a great privilege to be involved with. It comes with great responsibility as well. So I really like, how, the ability of clubs to make communities bigger and better and stronger. It nourishes me, but at the same time, I love footy. And I know it's an outcome, but I love winning premierships because there's nothing better in football. There's nothing more fulfilling. There's nothing, and it's very seductive. It's very intoxicating.
Your legacy's completely set. I mean, the 10-year plan has been executed perfectly. You delivered in the last year that third premiership as well. So,
but it's a continuum, mate.
Yeah,
it's a continuum.
What do you want to achieve now? More premierships, I suppose.
No, I think. Yes. If we focus on outcome, yes. I just, we've got this real interesting dynamic between contending and regenerating, and I think intellectually that is incredibly exciting to see how we manage that. And we've got some really smart people at our footy club in terms of how our lists and our program and the things, what football programs look like going forward and things we need to continue to prioritise, invest in, what our list looks like. That is really challenging. I mean, we seem to have had this boom-bust history in Richmond. We have these periods where we dominate the competition. I think the 30s, then the dormant through the 40s, 50s, and then to the 60s, 70s, early 80s, and premiership droughts. And we've been lucky enough to win a few in the last years. But I'd like to just put ourselves in a position where we just can contend for, big games for a long period of time, like Geelong.
Yeah, you don't want to be a team that regenerates by dropping away completely. You'd rather be that team that is continually giving your fans finals and things to look at.
And I find that really challenging and exciting.
We touched on your legacy and what it means to win 3 premierships, but take me inside your mind at the MCG in 2017 when the first of those premierships comes. We've seen the footage of you in tears, many former players the same. It had been a long time coming, 37 years, and so much hard work had gone into it from not just the 22 that took the field that day.
Yeah, it was incredible. I remember speaking to a colleague a few days before, and he said, whatever you do, your club is being showcased to the country around the world. Just enjoy the day. Put your feet up. There's nothing you can do. Just enjoy the day. There is no possibility you can enjoy the day. It's a day of high emotion and high anxiety, and I'm pretty even. But I remember just being so just on edge. I remember speaking to Tony Jewell. Tony was a guest of ours that day, and Tony, I remember that week as the previous premiership coach at Richmond, he'd done quite a bit of media. I just remember listening to him, and his confidence levels were incredible. In his own way, he said, look, Richmond for me, their momentum and they're playing the right way. And so he assured me that day, and he said, you're going to win easily. Anyway, he said, mate, you're going to win, I'm telling you. But it's not until that moment you tell yourself you won. Because at 40 points up, you think, Adelaide, they could kick 2 or 3 in a row and the worst could happen. So, but at that moment, when you say you've won, we've won. That's incredible.
Was there anything you thought about, or anyone you thought of in those moments of emotion?
You know what? I used to visualise winning. I'd be driving down the road. I remember 2011 driving Swan Street and being stuck in traffic, and I'd just drift off. I remember being in a tram, and I'd just drift off, and I'd visualise being at a grand final in front of the Olympic room as the CEO of the club. We won a grand final, and I used to visualise, and I could visualise that strong. Once I was crying. It was that strong, and I was always with my wife and my kids and whoever was around. I'm being serious. I guess that vision was so powerful that once I was in the tram, I had sunglasses on. I was just drifting off, and realised that tears coming out of my eyes, and I pulled myself together. And but when that moment happened in 17, my wife was up at queue level getting the kids. And I think Jude Donnelly was the AFL. She was there, and I was with Peggy. And it was just relief. I don't think it was about anyone. It was about relief, and we really did. I mean, Matthew Richardson, who we asked to present the cup, he was a symbol of that generation of Richmond people, players, administrators, coaches, volunteers, who'd given their absolute guts, but just couldn't get it done at the big stage. So he really symbolised that, and I got some wonderful, and we made that quite public. We made why we chosen Richo, not just because he's a wonderful player, but what he represented, and got a lot of feedback from people, so that meant a lot. They connected with that.
Yeah. Amazing. Another good Tasmanian too. Benny, good Northwest Coaster as well. So onto the topic
from Devonport, unfortunately, Richo.
Yeah, it's a little far from.
I was trying to explain to some of the Richmond people a couple of weeks ago at the Hillcrest game the difference between Burnie and Devonport. I said, Burnie's more like the Paris of the Northwest. Devonport's more like Beirut. So,
some of their games.
Not that reliable.
I watched many a Devonport Burnie game as a kid, and the passions would overflow regularly. What about the passion for this jumper on the table here, Benny? And what would it mean? It feels something's missing from the tapestry of the competition, not having a Tasmanian side. To me, how do you feel?
Yeah, look, it'd mean a hell of a lot. Look, I just played sport with so many talented people, football, cricket, all sports. I reckon there was a little bit of an inferiority complex. It was almost like, too hard, so I'm not going to put in the work or make the commitments probably required. It's too distant, too far away. I was lucky. I had a brother that blazed that trail and said, gee, if he can do it, maybe if I knuckle down, I can sort of do it. And so I think having a Tasmanian team would do wonders for the psyche of Tasmania, I think, and that would manifest itself in a whole range of factors around health and participation and the economy. And I just think it'd be wonderful for the state confidence and self-esteem. And it's going great guns, but to have a team representing the state playing in Australia's largest elite sporting competition would be wonderful. I just think it'd be wonderful. Equally as important, I think it'd be wonderful for the AFL because I just think as the code that it claims to be Australia's game, it's Australia's only Indigenous game. To have a foundation state that has been so rich and productive involved in their game would be a huge boost to the competition. Now, it may not be wildly accretive in terms of finances, but I've got no doubt, looking through the business case and the Carter report, it'll wash its face. But I think it'll be accretive in terms of the national standing of the game and the integrity that comes with that and the ability to leverage that and talk about that. And so I just think it'd be incredibly powerful. It'd be wonderful.
To me, it feels within touching distance now after many years of hope and discussion and business plans and different things and sentimental arguments that always were, to me, so powerful but were never going to carry weight with the AFL, which has become such a business. Do you feel it's now closer than ever before?
Look, I do. When you I did read the report. I read Colin Carter's report, and I thought that, look, some people took a very dim view of that. I saw it differently. I took that positively.
Me too.
I thought, well, here's a guy, in terms of our code, an eminent person who's seen the game from so many different angles, who is putting it on the record saying this is consistent with the purpose of the AFL, So that's the first thing. And there are challenges, but they're not insurmountable. And some of the old things that have been thrown up against it were just dismantled by Colin, intellectually dismantled. So I think that's really positive. I think, we've got strong bipartisan support in Tasmania. We've got a commitment to a new stadium, for cricket, football, entertainment, which would revolutionise that precinct in Hobart. And we've got commitments to infrastructure around the state. That's obviously very important, Al, as you'd appreciate. I think it's never been better placed.
Obviously, it's a hypothetical and would never get you to commit to something, but is it something you would like to be involved with your amazing resume of experience in the game?
Look, I'm always willing to sort of help out where I can. I speak at events and charity functions and foundations and Tassie, and they're always love jobs, and you're probably the same. That's just what we do. But look, it's a tough one because I do get asked to comment publicly about Tasmania a lot, and I'm very mindful. I'm the CEO of the Richmond Footy Club, and I love my job. And as I said before, it provides a lot of meaning to me. So look, it might cross that bridge we come. I mean, I can't stay at Richmond forever. So who knows?
All right. I know we said we wouldn't get you to sign just now, but if you could, that'd be... been great chatting to you. We just have 10 quick Tassie-orientated questions that we'll fire at you before we let you go. And they relate to largely Tasmanian football. So, in your eyes, the greatest Tasmanian footballer? These are pretty tough questions.
Gee, you know what? Peter Hudson's one of the most humble champions I've ever met. Ian Stewart made Richmond's Hall of Fame a few years ago off the back of 80 games. And there's people at Richmond whose opinions I respect say you could mount a case for him being the best Richmond player of all time.
Wow.
Now, when you think about the history of our club and some of the stars involved with it, it's a big call. So in terms of his, clubs, Brownlows, the sort of mystique around Stewart, you could make a case, but wonderful player.
Well, that's the impossible question.
It's impossible. Yeah.
What should the Tasmanian team be called? Tigers is out of the equation. Cricket and footy?
Oh, I think probably the Devils, wouldn't it? It seems to make sense. It's where the smart money is.
Colours?
I think the jumper here in front of me, mate. I think something not too far. Oh, that's a famous jumper.
Yep.
It's a wonderful jumper.
Yeah, it's
the map of Tassie.
And then in terms of the team song, should it be something, the Richmond Football Club song, a traditional football anthem? It's one of the best. Or should it be something new, more modern for the youngsters?
I think you can walk and chew gum. I mean, I love the Giants song. I love the it's an old sort of sing along Cossack type warrior dance song, isn't it? I mean,
Cat Empire, I think.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think you can do both. I mean, I found the 19 grand final week. I just humming it to myself. It's a big bad sound. We were playing them just as long as we didn't hear it at the end of the game. So I think you can do both.
Who should be the inaugural coach of the Tasmanian team?
Is Shorey positioning himself for it? Is he?
He's got 6 or 7 different positions he's in line for.
He did a wonderful job at Brighton Grammar in the APS. So, here we go. We've got Fags going around. What a wonderful contributor he's been to Tasmanian football and to the AFL.
All right, Fags is our man. President? Peggy's probably going to be ready for another opportunity.
She loves Tasmania.
She
she
does.
loves it. Yeah, she gets
She's
down there whenever
She's
she
a believer.
can. She holidays down there and loves the wine. And there you go. I'll start lobbying. How about that?
Yeah, please do. If Tasmania was to get free rein on one player from the AFL at the moment, say we were coming in tomorrow, who would be your first pick?
Patrick Cripps, a player of that ilk.
Okay.
It's a long way from WA. It's a long way from Carlton, but
you're not offering up Dusty?
Well, it depends. It depends.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't offer up Dusty. There'd be no one from Richmond. I'd be shot.
Where would you recommend a tourist visit in Tasmania? Where's a must-go-to destination?
Well, I'm going to be biased here, but I'm going to recommend the coast because it gets so often overlooked. The Launceston, Devonport, the East Coast, but the Wild West Coast, the Tarkine. Because I had a bit of time to myself over Christmas, I drove the Lower Highway for the first time.
Really?
Drove from Hobart to Burnie just because I had time. Went up through, the southwest wilderness area, up through Queenstown and further up, and it was just stunning. I mean, that West Coast, it is so wild and beautiful.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All complete with the gravel oval where we've had some great players.
Had a little drive past it too, yeah.
Ply their trade when they were young. The siren sounded, you're 5 points down. You can pick one Tasmanian to have a shot for goal, former or current player. After the siren, who would you trust to kick the winning goal?
I'd put Jack. Yeah, no, I'd put Jack. He's a star, Jack. He loves the moment. He'd crave that sort of moment and he'd want the ball. And I think you want to put it in the hands of the bloke who wants the ball.
Brendon Gale, are you a believer?
I'm a believer, Al. I'm a believer. Yeah, no, I'm a believer, big supporter. That'd be wonderful.
Been great chatting to you.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.